Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of Outdoor Hospitality Weekly. I'm Alex Burkett, joined as always by my co-host Matt Whittemore. Hope everybody had a fantastic week. We are super excited for this one, bringing a guest interview your way. We're talking, of course, with Ben Uyeda. He is co-founder and creative director of Reset Hotel. Really incredible background in terms of design, Ivy League teaching career. Ben, you're a media mogul as well. I think I can confidently say that with over 2 million followers and subscribers across YouTube and Instagram. Ben is a wealth of knowledge on all things development, design, and we're super excited to talk with him about his project out near Joshua Tree National Park. Ben, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Outdoor hospitality. That's a lot of syllables. What's the acronym? Or we've gotten any abbreviated term for this? Because it is a big trend. It's hot on a lot of
Yeah.
people's tongues when I go to different conferences, but it feels a little long. It feels a little descriptive. I mean, I think we should just call it like picnic or something, or uh, something a little sharper and shorter. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Ben, before we dive in, just give people, I know I gave a brief background there, but just tell folks a little bit more about who you are and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so my background's in design, more on the architecture side. What I quickly sort of realized with architecture is the worst part is the clients, and the best part is the creativity. And so I love the area of inquiry and despise the business model. So that led to a series of experiments and adjustments to kind of mirrored where technology was going at that time. So I started an architecture firm right out of grad school and said, hey, not waiting 10 years to get experience. We're going today. And we were able to build a client base by using search engine optimization when every other architecture firm was using those flash websites that weren't indexing.
Yeah.
So that was this first sort of way where we got ahead of the game using not cutting edge technology, but common technology that was on the younger side of things. So search engine was the first one. Then that firm did really well and it's still going. It's called Zero Energy Design. It's kind of a leader in sustainable design in the Northeast. Phenomenal firm, great quality of life for the employees. Really proud of what Stephanie Horowitz, my partner at the time and now the managing director, has done. I got impatient again. Felt like, well, it's hard to scale an architecture firm, right? And there were so many people, once you start getting successful, you start saying no to a lot of people that have small budgets because it takes just as long to design an affordable house as it does an expensive house. You just get paid less. So what we did is we created a company called Free Green, which became the largest supplier of home designs in the country by giving away free PDF house plans and then selling advertising right into it. So this was around kind of like 2008 to the 2014 range. So again, we're starting to use ad-supported media digitally distributed. That was the next sort of like technological mirroring act that we did. And then when we sold that company, I was looking, okay, what's happening online right now? And everyone was saying pivot to video. And I had partnered with, media companies like BuzzFeed, which was a hot new company at the time. And they were going, man, it's so hard to pivot to video. So I was like, well, I need a new thing to do. And I started making YouTube videos, and that led to Homemade Modern and the sort of media company Lowest Common Design. And what we've done there is I accepted the fact that it's hard to scale creativity, but I do have some appetite for growth. So what I did is I took inspiration from this early internet story back in like the Craigslist and eBay days. And it was the first story about the internet that really like tickled my imagination. It was about this guy where he started with a paperclip and then he made a series of trades on Craigslist or eBay, and he traded it for a cigarette lighter and then a stapler and then like a phone. And he went all the way from a paperclip to a car and then to a house. And what was interesting is you couldn't scale that business and turn a whole bunch of paperclips into houses, but you can dramatically escalate the size of each transaction. And that's what I did when I tried to pivot to video. So the first project I did on YouTube was I made a vase by cutting a wine bottle in half, made a really nice little vase, recycled materials. Bloggers sort of loved it. But each project got bigger and I kept acquiring more tools, more sponsors, more audience. And so it took me about 5 years to go from a vase to a house, and then it took me another 5 years to go from a house to a hotel, all through this sort of progression and escalation of creative projects. And I think this is sort of the model for developers, contractors, and stuff. You don't necessarily want to scale and go from building one house to building 1,000 houses. You want to scale from going a single house development to a larger development. And that way you can keep your team relatively small, maintain some sort of sanity and quality of life if you're not an efficiency monster that can just, manage everything perfectly. But it allows you to have the growth through projects.
Love it. Love it. I'm curious to hear, when did the hospitality and hotel ambitions come about, and when did the Reset Hotel concept, when was that born?
So in 2018, I did a YouTube series, a 10-part docu-series that got seen by 20 million people on how to build a shipping container house. It's not because I think shipping container houses are a good idea. It was, in fact, because of the opposite. I would see so many stupid articles who were saying, can container houses solve the affordability crisis? It's like, obviously no, but how do we prove that? So I did a full process from start to finish, showing how to get it permitted and showing why novel construction in general, while often good ideas from a tectonic physical standpoint, are not these silver bullet solutions to the cultural problem of producing more housing. So that was sort of the impetus, and my interest, frankly, is much more in affordable housing. But the interest from that, because it did so well on Airbnb, because of the novelty factor, drew a lot of interest. First, for people wanting me to scale an Airbnb business, which I said no to. And that's where I met my sort of business partner, Adam. He watched the video series. He was interested in novel construction. I said, hey, let's do a project. He has a background in finance. I have a background in design and construction and content. So it was a good partnership. And the way I kind of look at why hospitality in this particular moment, a lot of people focus on like Airbnb, pandemic, all these kind of things. I think it's much simpler. I look at this from a technological standpoint is we've seen in our lifetimes the attention economy emerge, right? We know that our eyes on screens are valuable to the most valuable companies in the world, period, right? So our attention is a form of currency, and the most powerful companies in the world command it. But I haven't met anyone in the last few years who aspires to more screen time. Almost everyone I talk to wants to go from 6 hours to 5 hours or from 5 hours to 4 hours. I haven't met anyone saying like, what's the Matthew McConaughey kind of meme? We got to pump those numbers up from, no one said, oh man, I'm only at like 6 hours of screen time today. I gotta get those numbers up to 7. It's the opposite, right? And we're not producing population in developed countries at a rate to grow the total amount of attention available. So I've done really well in the attention economy through ad-supported media and through brand partnerships and all these things as a content creator / influencer. But I see the limit for more available eyeballs for minutes of content consumption. I think we've peaked on that. And what's going to happen is the most affluent and thoughtful, smartest and conscientious and spiritually balanced people in the world are actually going to actively try to consume less content. That's where I think there's this segue between what I've done as a content creator and physical reality in real life experiences, or IRL as the kids would say, becomes the dominant sort of opportunity. When I grew up, sort of every hotel was expensive. Like we would camp, we wouldn't, Motel 6 was a lot of our things. So I've always had some fascination with hotels in general. I worked at a Marriott when I was a teenager and kind of thought it was not a great experience I loved working there. Being a bellman's one of the best jobs in hospitality you can get. But didn't find it particularly dynamic, so I kind of had this background where I thought there were some opportunities there for doing things differently. And what I kind of saw when I started taking hospitality seriously is that I knew of a lot more restaurants that were idiosyncratic, nuanced, and really charming than I did hotels. And that was much easier to find the perfect restaurant than the perfect hotel. And hotels were a little bit more one size fit all. And so I said, creative challenge. Also, hotels are a great opportunity for creatives and designers because there's a lot of stuff in them, and you don't have to deal with the same consumer pressure as when you're designing a house for someone. People start complaining about all these things that are ultimately coming from their own sort of subjective lifestyle. With hotels, you get to sort of lead about what their lifestyle should be for the next 3 to 4 days.
Fascinating stuff. So 2018-ish, the idea for Reset Hotel came about.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how that concept and project evolved, pre-development, finding the site, planning, construction, and take us through from conception to where we are today.
Yeah, I'll give you some of the key observations. The first one was from my business partner, Adam Winiger. And we were looking at we were well within the Airbnb boom. People were being like going out to nature. Pandemic was accelerating that. But even before that, there was a pretty sizable uptick in Airbnb to areas outside of national parks. When that happened, you started seeing a lot of YouTube videos and TikToks or Instagram videos of people saying like passive income with the Airbnbs, all the Airbnb, I don't get a lot of the crypto influencers in my For You feed, but I do get a lot of the Airbnb influencers. And we were sort of looking at that and we were thinking about, where do we kind of want to position ourselves? And we saw the rising prices of residential land. I did not like the ethics of developing residential lands for hospitality. I think that's particularly in a place like California, seems like not the right move to do, given this sort of state of housing. And Adam started saying, hey, commercial land is underpriced. And so he did a real thorough search throughout the entire high desert area, looking for commercial land that would have the scenic qualities that we could do. And he had to cold call people and like track down information because this was not stuff that was listed. So he started hustling on the land side and ultimately acquired several parcels that we combined into one to total to 180 acres. Once we sort of put that land together, that's when really the design and the conception of Reset started. And in general, I've been to Almond Gary, love it, kind of out of the price range for most people. I think
Sure.
Ace Hotel is a really interesting brand, and I think they did more with less. I'm aware that in my lifetime, the cool hotel brand is constantly shifting. When I was really young and in Boston, W Hotel was pretty cool. Was doing a lot of stuff with magazines and print at the time. W Hotel's not very cool now.
Yeah.
Ace Hotel had a good run, the Standard, the Line, all these other ones. Now the Proper's kind of like maybe has the championship belt. But what we saw is that it's rare for something stylistically to be popular for more than a decade. And I think the W Hotel's run was probably even less than that. So that kind of gave us the confidence of being a small upstart and having sort of our finger on kind of digital media and understanding how to do distribution on the content side, that we could come up with something pretty cool. And we think that the sort of nature of luxury is changing pretty rapidly. Like, it used to be luxurious to do the least amount of effort and just recline on the sofa that feels like a cloud and have someone bring you a drink. Now the aspirational lifestyles involve a little bit more self-inflicted suffering, whether it be cold plunges, workouts, ultra marathons, and those kind of things. And even like with food, I think I see the trend away from, everyone still loves a Michelin star restaurant that carries a lot of cultural cachet. But I see farmers markets have gone from kind of being like an affordable, scrappy, hippie thing to kind of be the higher end of food, and farm to table being one of the most aspirational types. And so what I see is similar to that kind of attention economy waning and people want to get a little more primitive, a little bit more raw. I see a lot of the cultural trends, whether it be health and fitness, people want to get a little bit more hands-on, a little more dirty, and a little closer to the source. And with land right next to a national park, we're like, this is sort of the initial sort of brand conception for what we're going to do with Reset.
Ben, talk a little bit more about that kind of indoor-outdoor approach. And I know you guys had an article in Forbes here recently come out where you mentioned your philosophy between kind of being disconnected while also staying connected to the people at the property. Can you just dive into a little bit more of that hospitality operations philosophy and how you guys are really kind of viewing how you're going to sit in the market?
So we thought about Reset as what is our market? Who are our customers? And so we started by looking at the national parks data. And there's about 3 million people that come to Joshua Tree every year. The majority of them are coming from LA. Okay, so we know the majority of our customers are going to come from LA, and they're probably going to drive out 2 hours from downtown LA to Joshua Tree. Okay, that's point one. Then we think, well, what do these people have access to in LA that would, or more importantly, what don't these people in LA have access to that would make them come to Joshua Tree? So obviously the national park is one thing, and you can't sort of replicate that. So that's the anchor. But in terms of where they pick to stay, what do we offer them that's abundant here but scarce in LA? Stars are one thing. You go out in a major city, you look up in the sky, you're not seeing stars on the majority of nights. You see the moon every once in a while, but you're not seeing those kind of celestial activities. There is sort of a trend towards like stargazing and all these kind of things as an aspirational, stylistically cool thing. So the sky is a commodity that we can kind of build upon. Okay. Sunsets, they have great sunsets in LA, particularly if you're looking over the ocean. You see them as you're driving by, but we can offer that too, but not necessarily a point of differentiation. Space. Land out in the high desert is relatively inexpensive. With 180 acres, we can give someone that's spending $4,000 a month on their downtown LA apartment an outdoor experience that they can't get there, even if they're paying a relatively high price point for a really nice condo or apartment in a very nice building. It's that uninterrupted views. We can look far into the distance and see a minimal amount of human obstruction. So we kind of took some of the things that we really liked about Amangiri, where there's no railing. I think railings make people think Carnival Cruises and Disney's. So we tried to keep the whole physical development as low to the ground as possible to not trigger multiple steps, which then trigger sort of railings, which then make you feel like you're controlled and being managed like a freaking tourist. We wanted to keep it low and uninterrupted. So those were the first two things, the sky and then the uninterrupted views. In our case, they go across the whole 180 acres and you actually see the mountains of the national park from your patio while you're drinking coffee in the morning. Wow. So it was those kind of simple commodities of space and sky that we think are the things that we can kind of arbitrage with inexpensive land out here, but still charging LA rates in terms of hospitality to people coming from LA.
That's awesome. And, you know, we talk to a lot of developers, investors. I think California is notoriously a difficult place to develop in, or at least thought of as that. Talk to us about some of the hurdles and challenges that you experienced, getting this development off the ground.
I don't think any place is more difficult than another. I think it just comes to whether or not you're looking at a large supply coming in behind you because it's easy, right? So sure, you can do a lot in Arizona or Texas or some of these other places, but that means the barrier to entry is just lower and you're still ultimately competing against the field. And so is that easier when there's more entries? I don't think it's easier to make a YouTube video than a Netflix show. It's just different. There's less permissions required to make a YouTube video, more permissions required for a Netflix show. But once you got that permission, you can kind of get locked in. So I kind of don't see there being a difficulty difference. Now, there's more steps to developing in California. But if you have a group that's smart, that has people on the development team that have a background in the technical aspects of design, it's probably easier to have a competitive advantage in California than it is in a place like Texas, where the advantage is money and connections to sort of construction labor. So I really think what's easier depends on your team's infrastructure. And I think this is the part that's often missed by developers. When developers talk, the assumption is often that the skill set for that developer is coming from a very specific range of having access to sort of financing, understand sort of a structure of sort of equity to debt, and those types of things. And that probably is the most common developer type. But the developer profile or the path for a developer when I've done my own sort of developments as a designer is very different. I'm not trying to compete with them. I'm not as financially astute as they were, but I know more about construction. I know more about cost-effective construction, and I have a better pulse on where design trends are going. So my development model has to be totally different. It would be hard for me to compete with them on their terms. It's impossible for them to compete with me on mine. So when and that's why for a project of this size, it was so important that I partner with someone so that we can kind of form the Voltron monster that can do a little bit of everything. But California, you know, it gets a California gets a bad rap. But when I hear people that express anger or frustration at California, it is not coincidental that those people tend to be impatient and not people that actually read PDFs. If you have a tolerance for reading PDFs, you can figure out permitting.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, it means that you just want to kind of deal make and lock in a good interest rates on the construction financing, take the contractor out for a few steak dinners and kind of coordinate from there. If you're or it means you don't want to constantly involve your design. You want to pay your architecture firm to render something, and the minute sort of the permitting process tells you need to change it, you throw up your hands and you say, this is impossible, and you cry like a little baby. That's what I actually see when people sort of complain about California. Now, California is very difficult, and a lot of regulations are, I think, generously redundant and time-consuming to accomplish. But they are understandable if you read, and if you are understandable, if you have the patience to go through the documentation. And I think the only thing that would be really disappointing would be if they started off really hard for you, and then suddenly they sort of cut them in half in terms of the requirements for your competition. But that doesn't seem to have happened. It could be happening due to the Palisades fires and those kind of things. I think there's some actual political pressure. But even though we had to go through the hard part of CEQA, I still wouldn't wish it on anyone else, and hope they do pull them back just a little bit.
Beyond some of these sort of regulatory challenges, the parcel that you guys have is out in the desert. So what kind of development challenges have you guys maybe faced with the location and kind of how you chose to do this build out? Was there anything that sort of came up through that process that was challenging along the way?
So developmental challenges relate to how many times you redesigned a project, right?
Change orders.
Right. So I think design is not separate from the pro forma. There's the pro forma, which kind of gives you the financial infrastructure and helps you sort of define the physical scale of the project as it relates to that marketplace. But that's always changing. So for a great example was originally we were going to do a 20-room hotel. And then we were working with the city, went and sat down with them. That's another thing I really believe in is go sit down with the city planners. Don't lob giant drawing sets and renderings at them and then get annoyed when they have some comments or suggestions. Go in, sit down with them, talk to them, learn about the city's goals, learn about what's difficult about their job, learn about which projects they think have been successful in the past. So we sat down and talked with them. And we're like, oh, we wanted to do a 20-room hotel. The minute we were over 10,000 square feet, we had to do a packaged sewage treatment plant, and we couldn't do sewage. No sewage, municipal sewage in this location. Okay. How much does a packaged sewage treatment plant cost? Ooh, 500 to 700,000 as a back of napkin kind of a cost estimate. Well, looks like we're going to have to build a bigger hotel. So immediately the design concept had to change. Much bigger property, more rooms to sort of distribute the cost of that infrastructure, and so on and so forth. When we found out about the exact requirements for Southern California Edison or the fire marshal, these things, the design keeps changing. And so the developers that really struggle with this are the developers that are so afraid of risking that kind of soft cost money because they have to pay it out to their architects. And I would say it's just because they're not actually well suited to be developers, because they only know the financial part and they don't have the ability to kind of adjust the design. If they actually knew design and construction, they could do this in real time, as our team was able to sort of do. But if you're only a product of favorable interest rates, environments, and lending relationships, then you're going to struggle with those. And we've seen about 15 to 20 projects similar to ours in the outdoor hospitality space. A few of them make it to hearings. Most of them kind of give up before then. And it's often because they sort of blow their wad on sort of soft cost. They get all excited about these renderings. They get some friction with the city being like, yeah, you didn't really pay attention to this, or you were having very wishful thinking about your interpretation. And then they're forced at doubling up on their soft costs, at least for like the schematic or design development stage. And that's when they start to get cold feet.
Interesting. I'd love to dive into the specifics of the hotel. You're a designer. This is obviously a very design forward project in Reset Hotel. Tell us about what exists, what will exist. It's opening soon, correct? In a couple months here. That's the plan?
Hopefully.
So it's 65 rooms? Do I have that right?
65 keys on 180 acres. We went with steel framed modular construction. So there's about 65 to 70 modules that make up the common spaces and the rooms. We have 25 suites, which are a 320 square foot module. Takes up the entire room. What we felt was most important is that each room have private outdoor space. Remember when I said that the sky is the commodity we can offer the people in LA that they don't get to see clearly? Each room has a private patio. No other guests have access to. Day beds, fire pits, lay down, stare up at the sky, have a glass of wine. So that's like the minimum commodity is everyone gets private outdoor space. And that's often, even if you're paying $5,000 or $6,000 a month for a beautiful luxury apartment, maybe you got a little balcony, maybe you have a shared roof deck, but you actually don't have a substantial amount of square footage for private outdoor space. So those are the baseline ones. From there, we start layering in different amenities all the way to the furniture design and all those kind of things. But everyone thinks that stuff is great, and it's all a matter of sort of subjective. What we did offer was on 15 of the suites, we have a beautiful quartz outdoor bathtub. Because in my 20s, I thought jacuzzis were cool. As I got into my 40s, I was like, do I really want to get in someone else's water? It's one thing in a common space, right? It's another thing in a suite, like a private suite, and you're like, this water is the same water as the last guest had. So I really like this idea of these like outdoor bathtubs that you fill from scratch. So that was like a pretty fun amenity. The other thing that we're looking into now is sort of larger scale installation art that I'm sort of working on with my team, and actually figuring out how to scale a sense of craft, right? And so much of when we talk to a lot of FF&E providers and stuff like that and interviewing people to sort of come onto our team, they're all like, okay, we have these contacts in Vietnam, these ones in Mexico, this is where we get our pottery, right? And it's all these overseas things from these really talented craftspeople, but a lot of the stuff ends up looking the same. And so what I'm really proud about is that a lot of our furniture and FF&E furnishings are fabricated within 20 miles of the hotel. So we looked at a proposal from an interior designer and an FF&E provider, like, okay, we can buy these vases. These ones are sort of on trend. These come from here. Then they go in a container, and then we pay these tariffs and customs and all these things. And we're like, okay, so that's the final price. So instead what we did is like, well, we got a lot of rocks on the property. I love working with rocks. So we went and collected a bunch of rocks. We cut the bottom so they would sit flat, drilled a hole in them so they'd be like a dry vase. And now for our sort of labor costs on those are about like $30 to $40. We have something that's different for every room, that's locally sourced, has a much better story, and the videos of us making those stone products got about 600,000 views on Instagram. So we were able to achieve a marketing benefit, maintain a low cost for design or for FF&E, but at the same time do something that was one of one and distinct, and that the story isn't this kind of bullshit one about, oh, we locally sourced from artists because we hired one person to do a painting that's in one room. No, it's actually real from people that live here and do that. So I'm personally, with me and my team of 3 that kind of do the sort of content and fabrication stuff, we're probably building about 500 pieces of furniture. And we had got these costed out overseas in Shenzhen, and we were price competitive once you factored in shipping, particularly for the heavier concrete stuff. So we priced out these like cool concrete tables that go around our solo stoves, which are our fire pits for each sort of patio. And the shipping cost alone from either Vietnam or China for these kind of like heavy, and they would have done a cheaper version of concrete where it's like foam with like a concrete cover. But the shipping for each one of these kind of bigger volume items that has some significant weight to it was going to be greater than our fabrication cost here. So that's kind of one of the parts that I think is really cool. The other thing there is we needed these nice outdoor lounge chairs, sort of the modern version of an Adirondack chair. So we partnered with a company called Semi-Exact, which just got acquired. So now absorbed into a larger company. We're like, okay, US made steel powder coated parts. Those cost us about $120 for the base. And then our local team that we pay about like $40 to $50 an hour does all the wood pieces that fit right in. So we're able to again get custom differentiated pieces, cost competitive with overseas, simply by like taking kind of like a farm to table approach and getting a little more hands-on, mixing in some more precisely fabricated things from a factory with a little bit more kind of DIY things to get that right mix of durability, price, and longevity.
As the marketing guy here, Ben, I know you mentioned a bit about sort of the content creation process as you guys have kind of gone through FF&E and really generating a lot of great buzz and curating the brand as you guys gear up towards launch. Can you just talk a little bit about kind of the pre-marketing strategy, the way you guys have been really great in the press you've been putting out there, and just the way in which the brand has really been curated to get folks excited as you guys prepare to launch?
It's interesting. We don't have finished photography yet. So essentially all we have is ethereal kind of visions of what we hope the brand is. So it's a little tricky because we're trying to sell something that you can't see yet. And our kind of ramp up from, finishing construction to our first guests arriving is scarily short. We have a wedding planned in May that we are rushing to finish for. So I don't actually know, and I don't want to speak to sort of there's things I'm very confident on. This I'm actually not, because we haven't opened, we haven't sold, we've pre-sold a good amount of rooms, but we don't really know how these things will change once we have finished room photography and these kind of things. We haven't had a single review yet from a guest. We don't know if our service sucks. So I try to stay sort of mindful of that. But what I have seen in the rooms that we have kind of sold sight unseen, it seems because people are sort of interested in story. And I think the sort of part that we're actually actively thinking about and considering and don't have an answer yet, and these are sort of two competing ideas within our sort of ownership group, is the aesthetic of a brand. And I think our Instagram account for the Hotel Reset looks like it. It's very polished. Everything's like ethereal. You get a total clean, modernist, kind of stylish, upscale vibe from the imagery presented. You don't really get a sense of how big the rooms are or any of those kind of things because they're not finished. We also have a behind the scenes account, right? The Hotel Reset BTS. And that's construction stuff of like tractors coming in, excavators digging out stuff, me walking around the site, talking to the guys, showing stuff. It's casual, it's informal, it's construction yard content. Not ethereal, not particularly visually indicative of high end, but highly narrative driven. So what I don't know is what's the right mix of these things. I know that people don't simply associate, excavators with sort of high-end luxury things. I think they're really cool. I think more people think they're cool than we would suspect. But so aesthetically, I really like the main hotel sort of Instagram account. But if you look at the view numbers there, they're not nearly what they are within an order of magnitude as the much more choppy, organic stuff of that. So I don't know how we'll sort of fit out in that, because it's like, if we see the Instagram as a conversion tool, then I think that kind of high-end imagery is the way to go, maintain a really clean brand and try to funnel through sort of content creators, user-generated content and stuff like that. But if we actually need to really focus on awareness, it's probably going to be the more down and dirty kind of content that has more narrative in it that really draws people to it. When I look at other hotels, the worst thing I think you can do on social media right now, actually, let me rephrase it so you can click this. The dumbest thing I see hotels doing, the dumbest thing I see in hospitality social media is when they just take a picture of a cocktail in the bar. And the cocktail looks amazing. But you'll see a hotel account that has 10,000, 20,000 followers, and you'll see there's like 12 likes on this static image of a cocktail. It's so bad. And they're paying someone. They're paying a social media manager. They're paying a photographer. So they're creating expensive content that does not work. And they're doing that out of this fear of not being vain enough. And there's such a drive to present things aesthetically perfectly that they sacrifice narrative, which is a much more powerful tool in social media, particularly in these days where video is dominant over still imagery. So this idea that you could just hire a photographer once every 2 months, and that's if you have a generous budget, to take a bunch of beautiful stills that are close up on just this one beautiful cocktail and this one sort of other meal, this one little like vignette by the pool that just shows a little slice of the pool, but not the whole space. You might as well do nothing. You might and it may be a bit of a stretch, but I think it's kind of like when people put pictures of the food on the menu at a restaurant. If you see pictures of the food on the menu, you know it's not a restaurant actually aspiring for much. And that's what's kind of, I think social media can be kind of the menu. And so it should be, what I want to see on a menu is like the narrative of, this isn't a pork tenderloin. This is the acorn-fed one that came from this farm where we know the people and they do this cool thing with it, and then it's smoked for this long on this kind of wood, and it's paired with these things for these reasons. You don't want to just say pork chop and show a picture of it. Look at how big it is. So I think that's kind of the things I'm sort of playing around, but we're not open yet, and I don't really know. So I could be totally wrong on these things, but I will tell you we will be testing it, and that's one of the reasons why we have these two Instagram accounts, is we can kind of play with some different things, keep this really aesthetically clean and curated Instagram, and then kind of see which parts from the one that's getting really good engagement, where there's multiple videos over hundreds of thousands of views organically, and how do we pull some of that narrative things that are working in a live testing environment into a more aesthetically manicured place so that we can get the best of both worlds. And that's something that I think, actually, that would actually probably be a great tip. I highly recommend having two Instagram accounts at least, one where you're more behind the scenes and you just tell a young person, just go wild, make content, publish. If we find something's inappropriate, we'll have you archive it, right? But people aren't really A/B testing, and so they're guessing, and they're guessing in a very conservative, restrained way, which ends up with a lot of still images and not a lot of engagement.
Love it. Very well said. So you're nearing opening day here. Are there ambitions to do more hospitality projects in the future?
Yeah, I love the idea of hospitality. I like hosting dinner parties. I like cooking. I got a lot of my friends involved with this project, from Chef Al Rojas. I think the part I'm excited right now is taking things that I'm personally interested in and kind of share little insights as to why, and then turn those into physical things at the guests where they can see some sort of thread of my personal interest to me sort of figuring out fabrication to something they can experience with their friends and families. And so the most recent example of what I was doing earlier this week is I was ordering 40 tons of rocks. And that sounds like just, how do you buy 40 tons of rocks? How do they get delivered? How big are these rocks? How many rocks is 40 tons? And how big is a rock that's 1 ton? I actually think this is going to be really interesting content, because it's the type of thing that almost anyone I've talked to about the team, they had follow-up questions which showed they were interested in it. And they weren't interested in no one asked what I was going to design or make out of them. They just said, wait, how much is a ton of rocks, right? Turns out we can get these really nice gray granite river boulders, smooth, good to the touch, and they're about $119 a ton.
Wow.
Now, a 1 ton rock
Incredible.
is only about 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet, so we're going to get some up to 5 to 6 tons. But that's kind of the thing I'm currently most excited about. Ordering these rocks, making a little video of just this truck, dumping the smaller ones out. Now, once you get over 3 tons, you need like a crane or an excavator, and we got to get something called a chain basket and truss them all up with some shackles. So that becomes interesting sort of problem solving. And then you have to kind of place them and not squish anybody. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think I'm most excited about from a design, a fabrication, a content, and then being able to share that whole story with the future guests.
And Ben, as we start to wrap up here, can you just give folks, if they want to learn more about the project, if there's consumers on here who want to take the visit out to see Joshua Tree and are looking to, use Reset as a landing spot to stay, where can folks go to get connected and learn more about the project?
Just Google Hotel Reset Joshua Tree, check out the Forbes article. The Hotel Reset Instagram account is a great place to get information. And what I would say is, we're going to be pretty hands-on in the operations. I'm going to be bartending. So we think that I'm pretty confident we're going to do well in the weekends. Joshua Tree is a weekend market. People easy drive out from LA. I think midweek's going to be hard. So we're really trying to program against that. And so one of the things I'm currently entertaining is I'm going to be bartending, because I do a lot of like influencer kind of meetups and conferences and meet and greets and kind of stuff like that. And they always feel a little bit forced and people kind of stand in line. And what I've always sort of wanted is like, well, I just need a bar where I can bartend. And then people can kind of like, if they're staying at the hotel, and kind of sidle up and ask the questions that they want to kind of know, pick my ear about design, rocks, fabrication, nature, whatever their interests intersect with mine. So I highly recommend people checking it out. If you're interested in any of the stuff I kind of fabricate or do, we don't take a very scaled approach, right? So like one of the current promotional offers that we're doing is if you book a room using the promo code Ben, I'll make you something out of a rock. So you'll basically, when you check in, you'll be able to go to this room and there'll be a whole bunch of vases, bowls, sculptures that I made out of rocks with my own 2 hands. You get to take one. So those are kind of like the offers and things to check out. But I think probably the best place to sort of follow up and get a sense of me and what I'm doing is my personal Instagram account, Benjamin Uyeda. And for the hotel, it's just the hotel's main Instagram account, and see those polished aesthetics.
Love it. Ben, thank you so very much for joining us today. This was a really interesting, fascinating conversation. We're super excited to obviously keep in touch and keep watching the project as it develops and gets ready to open here. So thanks so much,
Thanks,
Ben.
guys.